Ethan Carter's life was a series of uphill battles, each one harder than the last. Once upon a time, he had dreams. Big ones. He wanted to design buildings that would touch the clouds, structures people would marvel at for generations. But, somewhere along the way, life threw him curveballs faster than he could catch them. His wife, Sarah, had been his anchor, his partner in everything. Together, they dreamed of raising their son, Liam, in a home filled with laughter and love. But, when Sarah passed away unexpectedly 3 years ago, Ethan's world crumbled. Suddenly, he wasn't just a grieving husband. He became a single father trying to hold on to what little remained of their happy life. Liam was only 3 when Sarah died, but now, at 6 years old, he was full of energy and curiosity. Ethan loved his son more than anything. But parenting alone came with challenges he hadn't anticipated. Between making sure Liam had clean clothes, helping him with homework, and ensuring there was food on the table, every day felt like running a marathon without enough rest. The bills piled up, and freelance gigs as an architect barely covered rent, let alone groceries or medical expenses. For months, Ethan juggled multiple odd jobs, anything from delivering packages to fixing furniture, but it still wasn't enough. Then came the final straw. His car broke down. It wasn't just any car. It was the same one Sarah used to drive, a piece of her memory Ethan clung to despite its age. Without it, getting to work became nearly impossible. Public transportation was unreliable, and ride-sharing apps drained what little money he had left. Desperation settled deep into his bones. He needed a stable job, something close enough to walk to if necessary, even if it meant swallowing his pride. That's how Ethan found himself standing outside Sterling Tech, a towering glass building that gleamed under the city lights. Sterling Tech wasn't just any company. It was a powerhouse led by Adrian Sterling, a name synonymous with success and ruthlessness. Adrian was known throughout the business world for his sharp mind and colder-than-ice personality. Employees whispered about his long hours and unrelenting demands. Some joked that he probably slept in his office chair because he never seemed to leave. To most, Adrian was untouchable, a man who lived in a completely different universe. And here was Ethan, walking through the doors of this corporate fortress, ready to trade his dreams of skyscrapers for a mop and bucket. The interview process was quick and impersonal, which suited Ethan just fine. No one asked about his qualifications, beyond whether he could handle cleaning duties. They didn't care that he once designed blueprints for luxury condos, or that he knew more about structural integrity than anyone else applying for the janitor position. All they cared about was filling the night shift, and Ethan needed the paycheck. On his first night, as he pushed a cart loaded with cleaning supplies down the eerily quiet hallways, Ethan couldn't help but feel out of place. The sleek offices and polished floors seemed worlds apart from the tiny apartment he shared with Liam. Yet there was something oddly peaceful about the emptiness. For the first time in months, Ethan could breathe without worrying about deadlines or daycare pickups, and he cleaned. Ethan noticed the corner office at the end of the hallway. Its glass walls offered a clear view inside, where Adrian sat hunched over stacks of papers. The glow of his desk lamp illuminated his face, highlighting sharp cheekbones and a furrowed brow. Ethan paused for a moment, watching silently. There was something almost tragic about the scene. A man surrounded by wealth and power, yet clearly burdened by invisible weights. Adrian looked up briefly, catching Ethan staring, and gave a curt nod before returning to his work. Ethan quickly ducked his head, embarrassed, and hurriedly resumed mopping. That brief exchange stuck with Ethan, though he couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the contrast between them. Adrian perched high above the city, and Ethan scraping by on minimum wage. Or maybe it was the flicker of humanity he thought he saw in Adrian's eyes, however fleeting. Whatever it was, it lingered in the back of Ethan's mind as he worked through the night, scrubbing floors and emptying trash, bins. By the time his shift ended, the sun was beginning to rise, casting golden light over the skyline. Exhausted but determined, Ethan walked home, already planning how he'd stretch his first paycheck to cover Liam's school supplies. Little did Ethan know, this new chapter in his life was about to take unexpected turns. The sterile halls of Sterling Tech held secrets neither he nor Adrian could foresee. For now, Ethan focused on surviving. One night, one paycheck, one step at a time. But fate has a way of weaving threads together, even when we least expect it. As Ethan tucked Liam into bed later that morning, he allowed himself a small smile. Life might be tough, but they were still standing. And sometimes, that was enough. Over the next few weeks, Ethan settled into his new routine at Sterling Tech. The nights were long, but they gave him a strange sense of calm. During the day, he juggled being a dad, making breakfast for Liam, helping with homework, and tucking him into bed, but once the sun went down, the office building became his sanctuary. It wasn't glamorous work by any means, but there was something comforting about the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the rhythmic swish of the mop against the floor. For those hours, Ethan could focus on one task at a time, instead of worrying about everything life had thrown at him. Each night, Ethan found himself drawn to the corner office where Adrian Sterling worked. He didn't mean to stare, but it was hard not to notice how different Adrian seemed from everyone else in the building. While most people left by 6 or 7, Adrian stayed late, often until the early hours of the morning. His desk was always cluttered with papers, coffee cups, and files stacked precariously high. Sometimes Ethan would see him pacing back and forth, talking animatedly on the phone or leaning over documents with a pen in hand. Other times, Adrian sat perfectly still, staring out the window as if lost in thought. One evening, while mopping near Adrian's office, Ethan accidentally knocked over a pile of folders that had been left too close to the edge of the desk. His heart sank as papers scattered across the floor. He froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. Would Adrian yell at him? Fire him on the spot? Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped inside the office to clean up the mess. To his surprise, Adrian barely looked up from his laptop. Instead, he simply said, "Thank you," in a voice so clipped it almost sounded robotic. Ethan nodded quickly and hurried out, his cheeks burning with embarrassment. That brief interaction stuck with Ethan more than he cared to admit. It wasn't just the fact that Adrian hadn't screamed at him. It was the tone of his voice. There was no warmth, no anger, just emptiness. It made Ethan wonder what kind of life Adrian led behind those glass walls. Was he truly as cold and unfeeling as people said, or was there something deeper beneath the surface? Over time, Ethan began to notice small things about Adrian that others might have missed, like how he always wore the same expensive watch, or how he kept a framed photo turned slightly away from view. Once Ethan caught a glimpse of the picture. It was of a woman who looked strikingly like Adrian, though older. A mother, perhaps. Ethan filed the observation away, curious but unwilling to pry. As the weeks went by, their paths crossed more frequently. Adrian started leaving his office door open during the night shift, almost as if inviting conversation, or maybe just fresh air. On one particularly slow evening, Ethan mustered the courage to say hello as he passed by. Adrian glanced up, looking mildly surprised. "Good evening," he replied, his tone polite but distant. Emboldened, Ethan asked, "Do you ever sleep?" Adrian raised an eyebrow, then gave a rare half-smile. "Not as much as I should." That exchange marked the beginning of an unusual dynamic between them. Slowly but surely, Adrian began to acknowledge Ethan's presence in ways he never had before. When Ethan stayed late to finish cleaning a stubborn stain on the carpet, Adrian brought him a cup of coffee without saying a word. When Ethan mentioned needing extra hours to cover Liam's school fees, Adrian approved the request immediately, even though such favors weren't part of company policy. These gestures were small, but they meant the world to Ethan. They also left him wondering, why was Adrian going out of his way to help him? For Adrian, the changes were subtler but no less significant. He'd spent years building walls around himself, convinced that emotions were a weakness he couldn't afford. But something about Ethan's quiet determination intrigued him. Here was a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders yet never complained. Adrian admired that resilience, even if he didn't fully understand it. One night, after catching Ethan humming softly while cleaning, Adrian found himself lingering in the hallway instead of retreating to his office. What are you listening to? He asked abruptly. Ethan looked startled but smiled. Oh, nothing special, just a song my son likes. It's stuck in my head. Adrian nodded, unsure of what to say next. The silence stretched between them, awkward yet oddly comfortable. Eventually, Adrian cleared his throat and returned to his office, but the encounter stayed with him. That night, as he stared at the city skyline, he realized he'd been thinking about Ethan's smile, the way it softened his tired face, making him look younger than he probably was. It was unsettling, this sudden awareness of another person. Adrian told himself it was nothing, just curiosity. But deep down, he knew better. Meanwhile, Ethan wrestled with his own feelings. He appreciated Adrian's kindness, but it confused him. Why would someone like Adrian, a wealthy, powerful CEO, care about a janitor struggling to make ends meet? Was it pity, guilt, or something else entirely? Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Adrian saw more than he let on. There were moments when their eyes met and Ethan felt exposed, as if Adrian could read his thoughts. It was unnerving, but also nice. For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen, not as a failure or a burden, but as a person trying his best. Their growing connection reached a turning point one rainy night. Ethan arrived at work soaked to the bone, having walked several blocks in the downpour because public transportation was delayed. Adrian happened to be passing through the lobby and stopped short when he saw Ethan wringing out his jacket. Without hesitation, Adrian handed him a towel from the supply closet. "You'll catch a cold like that," he said gruffly. Ethan thanked him, embarrassed but grateful. As they stood there, water dripping onto the marble floor, Adrian hesitated before asking, "Why don't you drive?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "Used to. My car broke down months ago and fixing it wasn't an option." Adrian frowned clearly, processing this information. After a beat, he said, "Take the company car tomorrow. It's sitting idle in the garage anyway." Ethan blinked, stunned. I can't accept that." Adrian waved off his protests. "Consider it a loan. You'll pay me back when you can." Before Ethan could argue further, Adrian turned and walked away, leaving him holding the towel and wondering what had just happened. That act of generosity changed something between them. From that point on, their interactions became less formal, more natural. Adrian started asking about Liam, curious about the boy who inspired such devotion in his father. Ethan, in turn, shared snippets of his life, how Liam loved dinosaurs, how he struggled with math but excelled at art. Adrian listened intently, asking questions that showed genuine interest. In return, Ethan learned bits and pieces about Adrian's past, a distant father, a strained relationship with his siblings, and a relentless drive to prove himself in a world that never felt like home. These conversations brought them closer, though neither dared to name the bond forming between them. For Ethan, it was a lifeline, a reminder that despite everything, kindness still existed in the world. For Adrian, it was a revelation, a chance to step outside the fortress he'd built around his heart. Neither knew where this path would lead, but for now they were content to walk it together, one hesitant step at a time. The turning point in Ethan and Adrian's unusual relationship came during a fierce storm that swept through the city one autumn night. The rain lashed against the towering glass windows of Sterling Tech, and thunder rolled so loudly it shook the building. By midnight, the power went out, plunging the entire office into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting an eerie glow over the hallways. But the elevators were dead, and the backup generators struggled to kick in fully. For a moment, chaos reigned as security scrambled to assess the situation. Ethan had been mopping near the supply closet when the lights cut out. Startled, he grabbed his flashlight from his cleaning cart and began checking for any hazards, spilled water or loose debris, that might cause accidents once people started moving around. As he worked, he heard hurried footsteps approaching. It was Adrian, gripping his phone like a lifeline, its screen dimming as the battery drained. "The stairwells are flooded," Adrian said tersely, frustration evident in his voice. "We're stuck here until they fix the generator." Ethan nodded, shining his flashlight toward the nearest supply closet. "There's room in here if..." You want to wait it out, he suggested, gesturing to the small space. Adrian hesitated, clearly reluctant to share such close quarters with anyone, let alone someone who cleaned floors for a living. But the alternative, standing in the dark hallway while thunder boomed overhead, didn't seem appealing either. With a resigned sigh, he followed Ethan inside. The closet was cramped, filled with shelves of cleaning supplies and spare light bulbs. They stood shoulder to shoulder, the beam of Ethan's flashlight bouncing off walls lined with brooms and dustpans. At first, neither spoke. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the sound of rain hammering against the windows outside. Finally, Adrian broke it. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. Ethan chuckled softly. "Could be worse. At least we're dry." That comment sparked something between them, a shift in tone, lighter and less guarded. Adrian glanced at Ethan, his expression softening slightly. "You always this optimistic?" he asked, half teasing. Ethan shrugged. "When life gives you lemons, right? Besides, I've dealt with worse than a little rain." His words hung in the air, hinting at struggles Adrian could only guess at. Curiosity got the better of him. "Like what?" Adrian asked, surprising, even himself with the question. Ethan hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, but there was something about the intimacy of the moment, the confined space, the shared vulnerability, that made him open up. He talked about losing Sarah, the sudden weight of single parenthood, and the endless juggling act of trying to provide for Liam while grieving. Adrian listened intently, his usual stoicism giving way to genuine empathy. When Ethan finished, Adrian surprised him by sharing a piece of his own story. "My mother left when I was 8, he admitted quietly. "She couldn't handle my father's expectations, or mine, apparently. After that, I learned to rely on no one but myself." His voice was steady, but there was a rawness to his words that resonated with Ethan. He understood what it meant to carry pain silently, to wear a mask of strength even when crumbling inside. Their conversation deepened as the storm raged on. They discovered unexpected commonalities, a love for old jazz music, a dislike of crowded parties, and a shared belief in the importance of family, even if their definitions of it differed. For Ethan, family meant Liam and the memories of Sarah. For Adrian, it was a complicated web of estranged relatives and unmet expectations, yet despite their differences, they found comfort in each other's company. By the time the power returned and the emergency lights brightened the hallway, both men felt changed. Stepping out of the closet, Adrian straightened his tie, attempting to regain some semblance of his usual composure. But his eyes betrayed him. They lingered on Ethan longer than necessary, filled with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Gratitude? Respect? Something more? The days that followed brought subtle shifts in their dynamic. Adrian continued to offer small acts of kindness, though now they carried deeper meaning. When Liam fell ill with a bad cold, Ethan needed to take a few days off work to care for him. Adrian not only approved the leave without hesitation, but also sent a care package to Ethan's apartment, a box of soup, cough syrup, and a handwritten note that simply read, "Take care of yourself too." Ethan stared at the note for a long time, overwhelmed by the gesture. Back at work, their interactions became easier, more natural. Adrian started lingering in the break room during Ethan's shifts, sipping coffee and asking about Liam's recovery. "He's doing better thanks to you," Ethan said one evening, meeting Adrian's gaze. There was a pause charged with unspoken words. Finally, Adrian cleared his throat and changed the subject, but the connection between them remained palpable. Word of their growing bond spread among the staff, though interpretations varied. Some teased Ethan good-naturedly, calling him the janitor with VIP access. Others whispered disapprovingly, questioning why the CEO would bother with someone so far beneath him socially. Ethan tried not to let the gossip affect him, but it wasn't easy. Doubts crept in, nagging at the edges of his mind. Was Adrian truly interested in him, or was this just another fleeting distraction for a man who thrived on novelty? And even if Adrian's feelings were genuine, How could their worlds possibly align? Adrian faced scrutiny of his own. Board members raised eyebrows when he promoted Ethan to facilities manager, citing his exceptional work ethic and leadership potential. Critics accused him of favoritism, forcing Adrian to defend his decision publicly. Privately, however, Adrian didn't regret it. Watching Ethan excel in his new role, coordinating schedules, mentoring junior staff, and improving efficiency, only reinforced his belief in the man's abilities. Still, the backlash weighed on him. For the first time in years, Adrian questioned whether pursuing personal happiness was worth risking his professional reputation. Despite the challenges, neither man could deny the pull they felt toward each other. Their conversations grew longer, their smiles warmer. One evening, as Ethan locked up the supply closet after finishing his rounds, Adrian appeared unexpectedly. "Walk you out?" he offered, surprising them both. Ethan nodded, and together they strolled through the quiet halls, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight streaming through the windows. They talked about everything and nothing: Liam's latest drawing, Adrian's upcoming business trip, the weather forecast for the weekend. It was ordinary, yet extraordinary. As they reached the lobby, Adrian stopped abruptly. "Ethan," he began, his voice low and hesitant. Ethan turned to face him, heart pounding. Whatever Adrian planned to say died on his lips, replaced by a faint smile. "Good night," he murmured instead, before turning and walking away. Standing there alone, Ethan exhaled slowly, his mind racing. He knew then that whatever lay ahead wouldn't be simple. Love rarely was. But for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to hope, for happiness, for understanding, for a future where two seemingly incompatible lives might somehow intertwine. The promotion to facilities manager was a blessing and a curse for Ethan. On one hand, it meant better pay, more responsibility, and a chance to use some of the skills he'd honed during his days as an aspiring architect. On the other hand, it thrust him into the spotlight in ways he hadn't anticipated. Suddenly, people who had barely acknowledged him before were paying attention, some with genuine admiration, others with thinly veiled skepticism. The whispers grew louder, fueled by Adrian's undeniable favoritism toward Ethan. Gossip spread like wildfire through Sterling Tech's hallways, painting their relationship as something scandalous or inappropriate. Ethan tried to ignore the rumors, focusing instead on proving himself in his new role. He poured his energy into streamlining operations, mentoring junior staff, and ensuring the building ran smoothly. But no matter how hard he worked, the judgmental glances and hushed conversations followed him everywhere. Some employees joked that Ethan must have special connections to climb so quickly. Others accused Adrian of crossing professional boundaries, muttering about nepotism and double standards. Ethan felt the weight of their words pressing down on him, making it harder to walk tall. Adrian, too, faced criticism, though he handled it differently. As CEO, he was accustomed to scrutiny and rarely let public opinion sway his decisions. Yet this time was different. The backlash wasn't just about business. It struck at something deeply personal. For years, Adrian had prided himself on being untouchable, immune to emotions that could cloud judgment. But Ethan had cracked open a part of him he thought long buried. Now every disapproving glance from a board member or snide comment from a colleague reminded him of the stakes. Could he afford to prioritize his heart over his career? And if he did, would Ethan even want him? Despite the mounting pressure, their bond continued to deepen. Adrian found excuses to visit Ethan during his shifts, lingering in the break room or walking him to the parking lot after work. Their conversations ranged from mundane topics, weather forecasts, Liam's latest school project, to deeper reflections on life, love, and loss. One evening, as they stood outside under the glow of streetlights, Adrian confessed, "I've never met anyone like you, Ethan. You make me question everything I thought I knew." Ethan hesitated, unsure how to respond. Part of him wanted to believe Adrian's words, to embrace the possibility of something real between them. But another part, the cautious, practical side, reminded him of the risks. "We're not exactly a match made in heaven," he said. Finally, his tone laced with self-deprecating humor. Adrian frowned. "Why not? Because I'm a CEO and you're a janitor turned facilities manager? That doesn't define us, Ethan." "It defines how people see us," Ethan countered gently. "And let's be honest, Adrian. You live in a world most people can only dream of. My world is messier, complicated. I've got Liam to think about, and I can't risk dragging him into drama." Adrian opened his mouth to argue, but stopped himself. He knew Ethan was right, at least partially. Their lives were worlds apart, shaped by vastly different experiences and expectations. Still, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that those differences didn't matter as much as they seemed to. What mattered was the way Ethan made him feel, grounded, human, alive. "Then let's figure it out together," Adrian said firmly. "Whatever challenges come our way, we'll face them side by side." Ethan wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered. How could someone like Adrian truly understand the sacrifices required to raise a child alone? How could he relate to late-night fevers, broken toys, and endless piles of laundry? These questions gnawed at Ethan, even as his feelings for Adrian grew stronger. A turning point came during Sterling Tech's annual gala, an event Ethan dreaded attending. Dressed in a borrowed suit that fit awkwardly across his shoulders, he felt out of place among the glittering crowd of executives and socialites. Every laugh, every clink of champagne glasses seemed to underscore the gap between his reality and theirs. Adrian, on the other hand, looked perfectly at ease in his tailored tuxedo, commanding attention with every step he took. Yet when their eyes met across the crowded room, something shifted. Adrian excused himself from a group of investors and approached Ethan, his expression softening. "You look uncomfortable," Adrian observed, smirking slightly. Ethan chuckled nervously. "Is it that obvious?" Adrian shook his head. "No, you look fine. Better than fine." His compliment caught Ethan off guard, sending warmth spreading through his chest. They spent the next hour talking quietly on a secluded balcony, away from prying eyes. Adrian shared stories about past galas, describing them as tedious obligations rather than enjoyable events. Ethan laughed, imagining Adrian trapped in small talk with strangers who cared more about profit margins than people. As the night wore on, Adrian surprised everyone, including himself, with an unexpected announcement. Taking the stage, he unveiled plans to expand affordable housing initiatives, citing conversations with Ethan about struggling families. "Not everyone has access to opportunities," Adrian said, his gaze briefly meeting Ethan's. "It's time we change that." The room erupted in applause, but Ethan barely noticed. All he could focus on was the sincerity in Adrian's voice, the conviction behind his words. It was clear that Adrian had been listening, not just to Ethan's struggles, but to the hopes and dreams hidden beneath them. After the speeches concluded, Adrian pulled Ethan aside onto the same balcony where they'd talked earlier. The city skyline stretched out before them, twinkling with lights that mirrored the stars above. For a moment, neither spoke, content to simply stand together in the quiet. Then Adrian broke the silence. "Ethan, I need to say something," he began, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. "I know this isn't easy for either of us. People will judge, and there will be obstacles. But none of that matters to me anymore. What matters is you. And Liam. You've shown me what it means to live with purpose, to care deeply about someone else. I don't want to lose that." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He'd spent months guarding his heart, afraid of getting hurt or letting Liam down. But looking at Adrian now, he realized fear wasn't enough to keep him from taking a chance. "I feel the same way," he admitted softly. "But I'm scared, Adrian. Scared of failing you. Of failing him. This isn't just my life anymore." Adrian reached out, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You won't fail. Not if we do this together. Let me be part of your world, Ethan. Let me help carry the load." For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan allowed himself to hope. hope that love could bridge even the widest gaps, that two broken souls could find healing in each other. As they stood there beneath the stars, the noise of the gala fading into the background, Ethan knew they still had a long road ahead. But for the first time he believed they could walk it together, one step at a time. The months that followed Adrian and Ethan's heartfelt confession on the gala balcony were a whirlwind of emotions, challenges, and discoveries. Both men knew their relationship wouldn't be easy. Society had already made that clear, but they were determined to make it work. Love, they realized, wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing each other every day, even when life got messy. Adrian's public announcement about affordable housing initiatives marked the beginning of a new chapter not just for Sterling Tech but also for him personally. Inspired by Ethan's resilience and dedication to his son, Adrian began reevaluating his priorities. He started spending less time buried in spreadsheets and more time connecting with people, his employees, community leaders, and even Liam. At first, Liam was wary of Adrian, unsure what to make of this sharply dressed man who showed up at their apartment one Saturday morning with a box of Legos. But Adrian's patience won him over. By building towers and knocking them down together, Adrian earned Liam's trust and slowly his affection. For Ethan, watching Adrian bond with Liam was both heartwarming and nerve-wracking. He worried constantly about whether Adrian truly understood the demands of being part of a family. Raising a child wasn't all fun and games. It meant sleepless nights, endless laundry, and navigating the emotional roller coaster of parenthood. Yet Adrian surprised him at every turn. When Liam came home from school upset because he'd been teased for wearing hand-me-down sneakers, Adrian didn't offer grand solutions or expensive gifts. Instead, he sat down with Liam and shared stories about his own childhood struggles, teaching him that kindness and confidence mattered more than appearances. That night, as Ethan tucked Liam into bed, his son smiled and said, "Adrian's cool, Dad. I like him." Their growing connection wasn't without its hurdles, though. The gossip at Sterling Tech intensified after the gala, fueled by photos of Adrian and Ethan leaving the event together. Tabloids picked up the story, speculating wildly about their relationship. Headlines like, "Cold CEO warms up to humble janitor," and "Love across social lines, a modern fairy tale," dominated newsstands. For Ethan, the attention was suffocating. He hated feeling like a spectacle, reduced to labels like janitor or kept man. One particularly nasty article accused him of using Adrian for financial gain, which left him seething with frustration. Adrian, however, refused to let the criticism silence them. During a tense board meeting, he addressed the rumors head-on. "Yes, I'm involved with Ethan," he admitted calmly, ignoring the shocked gasps around the table. "And yes, our backgrounds are different. But if you think I'll apologize for caring about someone who makes me a better person, you don't know me at all." His words silenced the room, earning him both respect and resentment. Some board members admired his courage, while others privately questioned his judgment. Regardless, Adrian stood firm, knowing that living authentically was worth any fallout. Balancing their personal lives with professional responsibilities proved challenging. Adrian's schedule remained grueling, often requiring late nights and last-minute trips. Ethan juggled parenting duties with his role as facilities manager, striving to maintain boundaries between work and home. There were days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them, when miscommunication led to arguments or when external pressures felt unbearable. But through it all, they leaned on each other, finding strength in their shared commitment to make things work. One evening, after a particularly rough week, Ethan invited Adrian to join him and Liam for dinner at their modest apartment. It wasn't fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread, but it was filled with laughter and warmth. As they sat around the small kitchen table, Liam regaled Adrian with tales of his school day, complete with exaggerated sound effects. Adrian listened intently, chiming in with playful comments that kept Liam giggling. Watching the two of them interact, Ethan felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. In that moment, surrounded by love and simplicity, he realized something profound. Happiness didn't come from wealth or status, it came from connection. As winter turned to spring, Adrian took another bold step. He invited Ethan and Liam to spend a weekend at his lakeside cabin, a secluded retreat he rarely visited. Ethan hesitated at first, worried about imposing or creating awkwardness, but Adrian insisted, promising it would be low-key and relaxing. The trip ended up being transformative. Away from the noise of the city and the weight of expectations, they found freedom to simply be themselves. They fished off the dock, roasted marshmallows over a crackling fire, and stargazed under a sky so vast it took their breath away. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a future where their worlds weren't separate. They were intertwined. Back in the city, Adrian continued working to bridge the gap between his corporate empire and the realities of everyday life. Under his leadership, Sterling Tech launched several community programs aimed at supporting single-parent families, offering scholarships, child care assistance, and job training. Ethan played a key role in shaping these initiatives, drawing from his own experiences to ensure they addressed real needs. Together they became a force for change, proving that compassion and ambition could coexist. By summer, their relationship had evolved into something neither man had dared dream of, a partnership built on mutual respect, unwavering support, and boundless love. Adrian proposed during a quiet evening at the park, surprising Ethan with a simple yet meaningful ring. "I don't need anything fancy," Adrian said, holding Ethan's hands in his. "Just you and Liam. Always." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes as he nodded, overwhelmed by the depth of Adrian's sincerity. Their wedding, held the following spring, was intimate and heartfelt. Friends, family, and colleagues gathered beneath a canopy of flowers to celebrate the union of two souls who defied convention to find each other. Liam served as the ring-bearer, proudly carrying the rings down the aisle as guests chuckled at his wobbly steps. As Ethan and Adrian exchanged vows, promising to stand by each other through thick and thin, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Life didn't magically become perfect after that day. Challenges still arose: work stress, parenting disagreements, moments of doubt. But they faced them together hand in hand. What mattered most was that they chose each other, over and over again, despite the odds stacked against them. In doing so, they taught everyone around them an invaluable lesson. Love isn't about where you come from or what you have. It's about who you choose to share your journey with. Years later, as Ethan watched Liam graduate high school, he reflected on how far they'd come. From those lonely nights mopping floors at Sterling Tech to standing beside Adrian as equal partners, their story was proof that hope could bloom in the unlikeliest places. And as Adrian wrapped an arm around his shoulders, smiling proudly at Liam, Ethan knew one thing for certain. No matter what the future held, they would face it together, with love lighting their way.